that when I asked you in our learning, Zer Zahav, a golden crown in and around the table, what is that a sign of? Table has bread, and it has surrounding it this ornament, this decoration of gold. What is that symbolic of? Rashi answered that question. I don't know if you saw it when you read through this paragraph. Look at Rashi Pasuk Kaf Dalet, verse back by in our chapter, verse 24. Zer Zahav. See what Rashi writes in the name of the Talmud in Yoma? 3 words. Siman, it's a sign for Keter Malchut. Wow. Keter Malchut. The Shulchan symbolizes national wealth. We're here talking about physical wealth, material wealth. Why? Why does the Shulchan symbolize wealth? Rashi continues, Shashulchan sham osher ugdula. A table is symbolic of wealth and greatness. Kimosha omrim Shulchan Melachim. A table of kings. Wealth, superiority. It's an idiom today in modern day Hebrew. Shulchan Melachim. They opened up a table for kings. A lot of the religious yeshiva high school world, they're off actually for the entire Sukkot holiday and Simchat Torah. And there are those yeshivot that they have a national mission, that they go to a peripheral city, a city development town, the yeshiva high school, or maybe just the 11th or 12th graders. Several of my kids, they did it. 2? Right. So we also had 2 that went to Chitzim. And they went to Chadera, Pardes Chana. Okay, there you go. And they would go and celebrate. They would leave their family, leave the yeshiva. 20, 30, 40, 50 kids would make whatever arrangements with the town. We're coming. Can you supply us some mattresses and give us some meals? We're going to dance from synagogue to synagogue. And that's what they would do. What would the residents of the town do? That's the expression. They open up a table. What do you mean open up the table? They put a white tablecloth. They bring out the best foods. And these young tigers, these 11th and 12th graders, they know how to eat. But they would provide them with such delicacies and such good food. That's called Shulchan Melachim. Meaning good, quality, superb type of food. Here, our Shulchan that we're commanded to construct and put inside the holies in the Mishkan is representing national wealth. National wealth. And therefore, we're going to ask ourselves, what is the ultimate understanding of the Shulchan? We'll get to it in a second. You have a question, sir?
Yeah, what's with this context? What's the meaning then when David HaMelech say, Hashem, he fixed my table for my enemies? What is it's like stability or something like that?
Economic stability, that's right.
Stability.
Yeah. My dear friends, who is the one that said yesterday another word instead of the word zer? Keter. Does anyone here remember a mission on Pirkei Avot with the word crown, with the word keter? How many crowns did the Jewish people have? It's a famous Mishnah.
3 crowns.
3 crowns, right? The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot chapter 4, Shlosha Ktarim Heim, there are 3 crowns. Keter Torah, Keter Kuhuna, and Keter Malchut. I repeat. There's the Keter of the Torah, that belongs to the Holy Ark, people that study Torah. There's the Keter Kuhuna, which is the crown of the Kohanim, that's related only to the Kohanim. And then we have Keter Malchut. Keter Malchut will be the national wealth related to the Shulchan. Is that clear to us? The national material wealth related to the Shulchan. Yet, The Mishnah says there's a fourth keter that's the best one. Do you have a good name? Do people like you? Do people admire you? Do people only talk good things about you? That's called keter Shem Tov.
Shem Tov. Okay, Shem Tov.
Remember that? Keter Shem Tov, the crown of having a good name, Ole al Kula al Gabehem, is above and beyond all those crowns. But the Talmud explains Keter Shem Tov, that's on a personal matter, the way we're explaining it. But the name of God that comes down into the Mishkan, the Shekhinah that comes into the Beit HaMikdash, is the Keter Shem Tov, the Shekhinah. Now, I once asked the Rambam, I think it was on live television, can you please tell us the role of the Shulchan, function, objective of the Shulchan? Do you want to hear what he said when he was interviewed? The Rambam writes in the Moreh Nevuchim, in the Guide to Perplex, Ma'amar number Gimel. My father-in-law writes about this idea here. He says, and I'm reading it in Hebrew, Vatzorach lamizbeach haketoret v'lamizbeach ha'olah. The need for the ketoret altar, the burnt offering altar, ukleihem and their utensils, mivuar, it's explained. We know how to use the mizbeach this way, that way. Which kelim do we use to bring korbanot? We know it's clear. Aval means. However, hashulchan veyot alav lechem hatamid lo yodea bo siba. The fact that on the shulchan is this bread, and it's on there all the time, I don't know the reason. And until today, meaning until he investigated the Torah, I don't know what reason to relate to this. Now, come on. Rambam, okay, he knew and understood the Shulchan not less than we understood it, even much, much, much more. Right? He knew that the Shulchan is it going around still, is the basis to put on what? Hello, are you guys awake? The Shulchan is the base to put on Lechem HaPanim. Okay? But what we don't understand, and it's clear from the source that we just read in Vayikra 24. Okay? But is there, maybe that's what the Rambam is saying, is there a type of Avodat Hashem? Is there a type of bringing something like on the altar?
Yes.
On the Shulchan?
Yes, so change it every week, right?
But the question is that a service to God? That's keeping a mitzvah that how the bread is going to be consumed and when it'll be put on. We don't see any waving. We don't see the reading of a parsha. In other words, maybe the significance of, is there a service of God regarding the Shulchan and Lechem HaPanim? These lechamim, do they go onto the altar? Yes or no?
No.
They don't go onto the altar. Is there any waving of these breads for Am Yisrael? No. Is there any statement said by anyone when he's dealing with the bread? Also no. So therefore, what shall we say the objective of the Shulchan is? God is the provider in the world. He's the king of the world. There's only one source that our economic welfare comes from, and that is from Melech HaOlam. Okay? The entire world is nourished, is provided for materially by Hashem. It's not honor for Hashem's table, for even one moment, not to have what on it? Every second, 7 days a week, every week of the year, there will be a very intricate way that when the bread is taken off at that second, not minute, the new lechamim are put on the shulchan. The melech of the world, of course, has no body, has no concepts of embodiment. He wants us to understand that he is the provider. Hazan et ha'olam. And you know what? Like we said today, You might think that putting breads on this table looks like voodoo, or make a theological error, that maybe some idolatry, putting breads on there. In any event, it's not that way. Every Shabbat is the nurture, the uniqueness of the oneness of God, God's creation of the world. The Kohanim, who are our men working on the mountain, the shift that's working that Shabbat day, will get a chance to get parts of the lechem. The shift that's exchanging them that day, they too will get a share of the lechem. Okay? But not for one moment will the Shulchan of God be empty of bread, because it's representing the national wealth, God's superiority to provide us our nourishment. Gentlemen, we saw from the Psukim in Vayikra 24, how many rows are there? 2 rows. 2 rows. Each of the rows has how many breads? 6 breads. The bread stood there for how many days? 7 days. Baked on Shabbat, taken off the next Shabbat. Now, you could think bread would, cause stench. They'll break into pieces, but there are ways. Regular techniques, the way it was placed, they're not touching one another. But of course, it's all miraculous. God is providing bread, because when the bread came off, it was still fresh and even still warm. And there was no reheating the bread. They didn't put it on the blech, on the plat of Shabbat to reheat it. It was still warm and fresh. Okay? Yes, sir?
The bread itself, is it in a box?
Yes. And that's the way it's open. It has openings. That's why it's called panim. It would be like this with an opening. That would be the karot, the pans. It had the form of the pans that would be opened. Okay? Now, in addition to this lechem apanim on these on the table, there were 2 spoons, or called in the language of Chazal bizichim. Each one had a little kometz of livona. You said it's called frankincense. It's part of the saraf that comes from the tree, which is one of the 11 ketoret sources. And once they were burnt, in other words, we would take the frankincense, burn it on the mizbeach, then these breads turned into an ishel Hashem. We saw that, the fire of God. In other words, wow, the incense was burnt. The breads now are considered eish, like a korban, like a fire of God. And that's what giveth, the Gemara says, holiness. What does it mean that it's holy? That you can't eat it anywhere you want. You cannot eat it. The breads taken off of the shulchan, no, they were not burnt. Okay? Only after the burning of the incense on Shabbat. By the way, which mizbech do you think it was put on? The Olam mizbech outside. Once that was right, once that incense was burnt, the breads were taken off, allocated to the Kohanim that start finishing their job, working the Shabbat, also to the new mishmer, the new guard duty that's beginning to work, and they would have to eat it in a holy place. In the Mishkan, we're talking about the courtyard, but not outside. I would assume also when we have the Beit HaMikdash, it'll be the Temple Mount. Some explain in the Gemara that by the burning of this levona, frankincense, it dispersed a very good scent in the area, and maybe the scent refers to gemilut chasadim, kindness. Bread, you have food in your house. You have food in your house. You invited someone over. You wanted to help provide for him. So the bread can be used as an instrument to do chesed. Okay? How much chesed was done with our soldiers over the last few months by organizations that were providing for them, etc. Okay? So much chesed, people baking, baking and making foods, all these things. So bread can be used as a source of chesed. The number of lechem apanim, how many?
60.
Sum total? 12. Okay? What is that coming to hint to? Why 12 breads? The tribes of Israel. All of them are equal in value. The same amount of volume of flour, the soleth, 2/10 of an ephah, were used for each bread to show us that each tribe is equal. The form is even the same form. Okay? We said that the form was made by the format of the pan, that's called a ke'ara, and that was used there. Of course, we have to not undermine the great miracle that the bread stayed warm, the bread stayed fresh, and it was eaten by God. God has the ability to provide in all types of situations. There's a famous mission on Pirkei Avot chapter 5 that talks about 10 miracles that would happen in the Beit HaMikdash to our ancestors. One of them was, never was lechem hatamid found invalid. What does that mean? The commentaries explain that the freshness of the bread was always preserved. The bread was never invalid because it's 7 days old. Today, would you eat bread that was 7 days old? I don't think so. Not even 2 days old. You spoiled people here. Always eating fresh bread. Okay? In any event, that's one of 10 miracles that happened in the Beit HaMikdash. The bread was never staunch, stale. It was always fresh, freshly eaten. And that means it was left there for 7 days. And now the Gemara gets into what happens if Yom Shishi is Yom Tov, when did you have to bake it? Or if you, in other days, there would be some times that the baking would be done 9 or even 10 days, and sometimes Pesach would be there and Yom Tov would be there. B'kitzur, it would be sometimes even 11 days. However, they would bake it mamash right before Shabbat, because the Gemara explains to us that ein afiyat lechem doche isurei melacha shel Shabbat v'Yom Tov. So generally, the bread was done on Yom Shishi. You would not be able to bake the bread in the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat. Why? It's melacha. What's the name of the melacha? Bishul. Cooking, baking is the same thing. So the lechem apanim would be produced, baked on Yom Shishi. Again, if Yom Tov would be on Yom Shishi, then you had to do it on Yom Chamishi. So then we break on Yom Chamishi, Shishi, Shabbat, Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, Revi, Chamishi, Shishi, Shabbat. It's already 10 days. It stayed fresh. There were so many miracles that would happen. So this was a great miracle that gave us an understanding of serving God. So gentlemen, we can sum up and say we've dealt with Keter Torah, the Holy Ark. We've dealt with Keter Malchut, the national wealth of the Jewish people, by the Shulchan. And now, the next subject will be the menorah. What would that be about? What would the menorah be about? Spiritual chokhmah. We're going to see. So we're going to see that tomorrow, Be'ezrat Hashem, the menorah and its significance.